Hello, what's up, and welcome to the Weekenders. This is the show where we talk about football and the best games, the best teams, the most exciting parts of the football season, which we are rapidly approaching because it's already like late July. We're getting into the thick of things in terms of media days and training camps and all that good stuff. So today we're going to talk about the SEC, preview the SEC, talk about the biggest storylines, the biggest teams. I apologize in advance for folks if you're Vanderbilt or Missouri fans, Arkansas. We had to leave some teams on the chopping block for the interest of time because the SEC is big and we can talk about every team, but we're gonna focus in a little bit on just a few teams in the SEC. And so, yeah, sorry, this is not going to be like a comprehensive preview of every team, but there are a bunch of those out there. So if you're looking for that, Google's your friend. But before we get things started, I want to say what's up to Shawn Coleman, our guest. Shawn, how you been, man? You're on mute, Shawn.
Here we go. Yeah, here we go. I think the last time that we talked some SEC, or excuse me, some NFL draft. And I owe an apology to one Lexi. She picked Bijan Robinson, number 18 in that draft for Detroit, and I questioned it. Right, I questioned it. When she did that, but they wound up getting Jameer Gibbs. That offense is pretty good. I know she's pretty excited about her Lions, but yes, I'm doing well, Max. I hope you've been well. Bobby, I just have way too many issues to sit here and wish you anything other than, hey, Oklahoma's joining the SEC. You're over here wearing a Thunder hat, just as very threatening to me as a Grizzlies fan. If I don't talk to you the whole podcast, we'll be fine. So, but it's good to be with two out of you three.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. Lexi, Bobby, of course, joins me as well. Yeah, Shawn, you were here last time when we talked about the NFL draft. And now we're here to talk about the SEC, and it's an exciting year for a lot of teams. But let's get started with, I guess, talking about the threat to everyone's presumed national champion, SEC champion, whatever you want to call it, in the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, this is the year where everyone's going to talk about the three-peat, and if you've been watching any college football news, you'll hear this stat throughout the entire season. No team has three-peated in college football since I believe Minnesota in the 30s. A lot of teams have tried. Alabama, Nebraska, Miami, all those dynasties you can think of, but no team has been able to three-peat since the 30s, and Georgia is looking like they could do it, but they're going to have to. Which team is the biggest threat to Georgia in the SEC?
I was gonna let you go first, Shawn, but I can go. Um, I actually think Bama and LSU are kind of right neck and neck on the heels of Georgia right now. Saban is like hungry and ready to get back at the top, but Brian Kelly's also been doing pretty well in recruiting and building that squad down there. So I think between the two of those, it's kind of just like a draw. But Georgia's definitely going to have a heck of a time winning the conference this year as compared to previous.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to one of those two teams in the West. Just looking at that Georgia schedule overall, it's just a remarkable cakewalk, mainly because they lost their non-conference, marquee non-conference opponent in Oklahoma. But the West, it's going to be LSU or Alabama. I don't see a lot of competitors coming out of the West. Other than that, I think if I had to pick one, it'd probably be Alabama. Just at this moment, the Tide are just, it's Alabama. So I feel like if anybody can match them strength to strength, it would be them. Just in terms of the athletes they have, in terms of the recruiting they have. Obviously, not a great year last year. Those two losses on basically the last play of the game, not great, but I think the Tide have enough to get back and kind of get even with Georgia. But I don't know. I think this Georgia team, I mean, they're just speeding all the way to the top, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm going to go with LSU, and I legitimately think that LSU could give Georgia a run for their money because the one thing that LSU has coming into this year is that they've got their established quarterback who consistently is among the top three quarterbacks in the conference, but they've also got their top pass catcher and Malik Neighbors back. Georgia does have Brock Bowers, but the thing that stands out to me about LSU is that you've got Brian Kelly and is coming into his second year. He's a coach that showed last year he can significantly improve his team as time goes on. And now he's had these talents in there for the second year versus being the first year. This isn't a team that I think many are going to feel is going to play like they did when Tennessee beat them 40-13 at LSU, third or fourth game of last year. Reason why I kind of favor them over Alabama is because this is the first time, at least in my memory, for a while, probably a decade, this arguably may be the worst backfield we've seen in over a decade for Nick Saban. When it comes to the Alabama backfield, when you start to consider the best players in the SEC, whether it be quarterback or offensive skill players, Bama still has a pretty good line, but their standouts are on defense. Dallas Turner, as well as Kool-Aid McChristy. I think LSU has the upper hand on offense, and nowadays, unless you're Georgia, I think offense is what matters. So Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors, I think, could give LSU the upper hand. I definitely think not only could LSU challenge Alabama, I think they have a very good shot of challenging Georgia for the SEC title.
Yeah, you all gave great answers. I think in the spirit of like this is my answer, and it's true, but it's not like a different team because I just want to like throw this out here as well as a talking point. Georgia, I think is going to have to fight all year long to not be a threat to themselves in terms of complacency, in terms of um, the transition between uh, the transition out of Stetson Bennett and now Carson Beck, who I think I heard Kirby Smart mention at one of the SEC media day that he or I heard it somewhere that at some point in time Carson Beck was ahead of Stetson Bennett on the Georgia depth chart a couple years ago. So obviously has the ability to play at a level that at or above Stetson Bennett. So I think with all that in mind, I think Alabama, Tennessee, LSU are going to be the names that pop up in terms of threats inside the SEC for Georgia. But I think getting out of the SEC shouldn't be an issue for Georgia. But that task and then going beyond and winning your third straight championship, I think Georgia is going to have to play, have to continue to be flawless for them to reach the goals that they have this year. So, well, I'm gonna throw that out there as an answer. Next, sort of something that has been thrown out there as a talking point. Some people, just might laugh at the question, but other people are seriously talking about it. So I want to, get everyone's thoughts on this. We're not talking about legacy, history, any of that. But right now, today, I won't say the date, 2023, July. The best head coach out of these three names in the SEC: Nick Saban, Brian Kelly, or Kirby Smart.
So I mean, if we're going at this very moment in time, I gotta go Kirby Smart. I mean, back-to-back titles, still killing it in recruiting. Got some things I've seen going off the field, but like whatever. I mean, he's got them locked in. He's got them so brainwashed that they think that like they're the underdogs in a lot of situations, and it's super impressive that he's able to do that. So I got to give it to Kirby for finally figuring it out.
That's a tough one because I feel like it's hard to not say Nick Saban, but what Kirby Smart has done is different. He is younger, he's hungrier. They are at the top of their game, and it's like if we're talking a head coach to head coach sort of thing, I would probably lean towards Saban, but he doesn't have all of his tools. His staff just went through a massive refresh. So we'll see.
Two straight national championships with Stetson Bennett. And the reason I bring that up is no disrespect to Stetson Bennett. He's not a naturally gifted quarterback when you compare him to other talents that were in the SEC. And the reason why is because he doesn't make mistakes. Kirby Smart's teams do not make mistakes a lot of the times on the field. They have, kind of like the Denver Nuggets and just winning the NBA title, they have the highest consistent floor. And that's why they won 2 straight national championships, especially when it comes to their defense. So Nick Saban, in my opinion, is the greatest college football coach in the history of football. But that doesn't mean that every single year he's the best overall coach, in my opinion. Right now, Kirby Smart is the best coach in America. Right now, Georgia is the IT program, and that remains the same until somebody knocks them off, like Dabo Swinney has done in the past, or potentially another school, Josh Heupel in Tennessee here soon. But all joking aside, Kirby Smart to me is clearly the best coach in the SEC.
Yeah, and I mean Nick Saban, like talking about as of late, we've seen sort of chinks in the armor, right? Like the inability to really like the great part about Saban is he used to seem like he was like miles and miles ahead of what everyone else is doing in terms of innovating, in terms of finding ways to win and, getting all the best players. And now it seems like, of course NIL has changed things, but now like he's not he's not dominating recruiting anymore. He's not, his the coaching staff's changed a lot, and he's not able to necessarily, dominate in that fashion. We've seen Alabama struggle on the road in the last couple of years, which has been kind of like weird to see for Alabama. And he's had some pretty good quarterback play over the last few years. And now this year moving forward, that's a question. So I feel like right now, Kirby Smart, deserves his flowers. He deserves to be the guy. I will shout out Brian Kelly though, because, and this, I mean, Brian Kelly's impressed me since Notre Dame, and I know he did other things before that, but I don't think anyone expected Brian Kelly to come in and immediately make LSU look like they looked last year. And so I think it's interesting. The SEC coaching is incredible, but answer is Kirby Smart, but definitely watch out for Brian Kelly down in Baton Rouge. But yeah, those really are kind of the biggest talking points right now in the SEC. There is a lot more. We could definitely go down the list. I almost wanted to talk about the quarterback situation in the SEC because, as the kids say, it's very mid. I think this is going to be an interesting year for quarterback play in the SEC. But let's move on to talk about some of the teams, and we're going to talk about, as we've done with all these previews, we're looking at the Vegas win totals, predicting whether we think the teams will perform better or worse than what Vegas has them at. And then kind of talk about why. And we're going to start with Auburn, who the biggest news of their offseason was they got Hugh Freeze to sign there from Liberty. They've also brought in Peyton Thorne, who Lexi, I'm sure, is familiar with from Michigan State. So trying to see if they can turn things around a little bit there in Auburn. And Vegas has them at their line at 6.5. Last year they were 5-7 overall, 2-6 in the SEC. We all have over for them. Consensus. Bobby, tell us why you think Auburn's going to be better than 6.5 wins this year.
Well, I just think it's a really low line, primarily. Hugh Freeze has look, I'm not a big huge Hugh Freeze fan. I don't like the guy for what he did at Ole Miss. He just kind of gives me the ick overall. But I gotta say, the man knows how to coach some football. And Auburn, not a good team last year, but this schedule's also pretty nice if you really look at it. And I think overall that's the biggest thing. They kind of gave him a bit of an easy waltz. When you really look at it, and when I'm counting it down, I just see seven. I see 7 wins right there, and it.
Like you said, their schedule is easy. They go through a bit of a storm when they're like even hitting at A&M, Georgia, at LSU, and they really don't kind of see much after that until Alabama at the end of the season. So as long as they can bounce back from that little bit that they go through there, I definitely think the 7, maybe even sneak 8 wins in there if they're lucky. But yeah, that schedule favors them a lot. So I could definitely see it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's going to help out is that they get that pretty manageable start to the schedule, which could really allow for Hugh Freeze to be able to work his magic with the quarterback play. Now they don't have just an overly attractive wide receiver room. They're bringing in a couple of new options at the quarterback position. Who's going to win that? But they start off against UMass and California, and then Samford, and then they come up on their 4th game of the season against Texas A&M. If they could have their quarterback room established by that Texas A&M game, if they can have their wide receiver room established by then, they could conceivably start 4-0. And I think with Jarquez Hunter in there as their running back, who I think is pretty unanimous as being a top 5 running back in the SEC this season, if they could ride him and potentially make some big plays in those first 3 games, get some confidence behind whoever they choose at quarterback and wide receiver, I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to struggle, defensively, but I think that Hugh Freeze probably not as big of a jump in his second year like Josh Heupel has. I think that Hugh Freeze will have a similar season in his first year at Auburn, like Heupel had in his first year at Tennessee. So I definitely do think schedule-wise, I don't necessarily know if this is truly an 8-win team talent-wise if they had a hard schedule, but I think the schedule and the opening of the schedule definitely helps establish them as a team that can win 7 games.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, I think that I had the over for Auburn. I think that you guys have mentioned the schedule. Hugh Freeze made people think Malik Willis was going to be the next Michael Vick, so I think like he's probably going to be able to.
He is. He is. He is. Don't laugh. Don't laugh.
Hey,
Malik Willis is the next Michael Vick. Stop laughing.
Tennessee is going to
Stop it.
The Titans are going to be the first team to bring back the 2 quarterback like Will Levis, Malik Willis system. I'm looking forward to seeing that. But no,
Stop it. Stop it.
No. In all seriousness, I think that I think Hugh Freeze, like Bobby said, Hugh Freeze can coach. Schedule's in their favor. I think it's pretty easy to see, to forecast where they get enough wins to sort of get over the 6.5. Obviously, they have to go out and prove it, but they've got some tough road games, but tough home games too, to be honest. But I think they'll be able to squeeze out, 7, maybe 8 if they can handle business on the road against, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, one of those guys, and then take care of business at home for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. But yeah, Auburn over 6.5 seems right. All right. Kentucky is the next team we're going to talk about. Kentucky, of course, lost Will Levis in the draft. Mark Stoops, I believe this is year 3. Correct me if I'm wrong, y'all. And
I feel like he's been there longer.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it has been longer. I feel like Kentucky's been talked about for the last couple of years, but maybe he's been there 4 or 5 years. I don't know. But anyway, Mark Stoops is still the coach. Will Levis is gone. They bring in not a new offensive coordinator, but they bring back their offensive coordinator they had 2 years ago, and Devin Leary from NC State at quarterback. Like to move to get a veteran in there. Devin Leary was pretty good at NC State. Just it's NC State, so it's hard to get the wins there. But Devin Leary definitely, I think is going to be a good option for them. Line was also 6.5. Last year they were 7-6, 3-5 in the SEC. Um, Everyone has under for them except for me. Um, Shawn, why are you lower on Kentucky this year?
I'll probably actually go over. What I found with this team is, or what I found in the SEC this year is that whatever the line was, which just is a hat tip to Vegas or whoever does the betting lines wherever they are, depending on what source you look at. I found myself going back and forth between are they half over or half less. And I do think now that, just looking at Kentucky, yeah, sure, they could win 7 games, but what stands out about them? On one end, they've got, a decent wide receiving core. Ray Davis is, one of the better running backs, coming into the season. Many are projecting him to be. They did lose a big running back in Chris Rodriguez to the draft. The thing that stands out to me, though, is that, a couple of things, both positive and negative. Is their defense going to be as good as it has been in moments over the past few years? Can Devin Leary come in and be able to have initial success, get off to a good start? We talk about them losing Will Levis, but let's be honest, Will Levis wasn't that productive in college. That's the reason why so many were judgmental about the Titans selected him when they did. So it's the name is certainly there in Will Levis, but is the bar just so high that Devin Leary has to overcome it? Probably not. Now, I think Kentucky can win 7 games. Do I feel Kentucky can honestly challenge for the second spot in the SEC East? No, not at this point. I think that they're going to be able, I think that they will have some success against teams they should have some success again, lose a game that they're not supposed to, but then they'll go up against, some pretty talented teams in the SEC, and I think that, their tier will be established. So, sure, good season, 8 wins, possibly can get 7, so I'll go over with them. But they're a team, in my opinion, who they've got some question marks. You can paint it as them having, solid wide receiving core or, solid weapons, but let's see them prove it. And Devin Leary has proven it in NC State. Let's see what he can do in a new system. So I'll take the over at 7 or 8 games, but anybody who's potentially projecting them to win, 9 or 10, I think that's a bit of a reach.
All right, well, Lexi, Bobby, both have. Are you guys both sticking with under still? Go ahead, Bobby. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sticking with the under. Devin Leary, I will say, when I made my under pick, completely forgot he went to Kentucky. One of those, the portal messes with your mind like that. I like the addition, but my thing is with a better quarterback in Will Levis, they kind of disappointed me last year. They went 7-6, kind of fell off a bridge about. Just felt they were not very good from the middle on, and you could tell that they were kind of fraudulent, and it just kind of burst. I don't see enough improvement for me to think that they're going to not only just stay at that pace, but to either overpass it or improve upon it. So I think this is a team that just kind of has a dip this year as opposed to last year. I will say very, very easy schedule. That first 4, Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, and at Vandy is just pretty unreal. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but they have a propensity to completely fall off, and kind of looks like the schedule's setting up the same way.
I think the early schedule is why I took the over, because it's just like such, like, I mean, you go into Georgia possibly 5-0, like they get Florida at home after the Vandy game. Like, it's going to be hard for me to see them not winning 2 more games after that. Whether it's Missouri or Louisville or at South Carolina, at Mississippi State. Like, it's you're going to have to steal one on the road against an SEC opponent, or beat Georgia or Bama, which is unlikely. But I mean, I could see them. It would be tough to see them not like get to at least 7. I think 6.5. Like, if it was 7.5, I'm taking the under. But 6.5, like, it's. I see it. Lexi, go ahead.
Yeah, so I didn't realize they play like the MAC a lot and often. I looked up their record, like they've played like 36 games against MAC teams. So pretty crazy. But yeah, they've got to go, in my opinion, 5-0 going into Georgia if they even want to sniff 7 games. Because I feel like after that, even though they're playing it, but it's at Mississippi State, at South Carolina, at Louisville, like they're home versus Bama, home versus Tennessee. Like they might win that Missouri game at home, but away at Georgia, it's just they're like that fall off. This schedule is a perfect setup for them being like 5-0, and then boom, they like don't win another game the rest of the season or something. But I'm not sure how they're going to be. It's well, I guess we'll find out once they play Georgia and how they bounce back from that, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I think it'll depend on. I think going 5-0 going to Georgia is going to be a great confidence boost for the team. I think the end of the schedule will depend on like where the other teams are at. So like, is South Carolina still? Do they still have a chance at like bowl eligibility or whatever? When they play them, what's Louisville going to be like? I think Mississippi State, November 4th, their season could be over. Like, it's like I think those games will be a determination of all right, like what's Kentucky, what do they have in their grasp, what are they looking forward to, and then those other teams, like where are they at? Like, could they, are they still going to be playing for something at that point in the season? I think it'll be interesting to see. Um, okay, so again, Kentucky's line was 6.5. Me and Shawn took the over. Bobby, Lexi under. Speaking of the Gamecocks, South Carolina is the next team we're going to talk about. Their line is 6.5. All of us have the under, but Shawn, what do you like about the Gamecocks this year?
I mean, just look at last year. That they ended the season about as good as any team did in the conference. That they destroyed Tennessee. I mean, I was watching that game, and for the first 3 touchdowns, I was like, hey, I think we can come back from this. But then after that, it just became clear they had Tennessee's number, and they cannot do anything about it. They beat Clemson. I know that Clemson was a bit in shambles at the end of last year. They beat Clemson as well. So this is a team that is not afraid to take on, the giants that are out there in college football and do well. Shane Beamer is very good in terms of putting himself in a position to do it. And I think that, one thing that he's got in Spencer Rattler, he's got a motivated quarterback. Up until the end of last year, Rattler was one of the biggest busts of a quarterback that we had seen in recent college football memory. He now has the ability to, turn it on like we've seen a Hendon Hooker do or a Will Levis do. These older quarterbacks who in a new situation made the most of their opportunity, and he's got some motivation to get it done. I think they can get 7 or 8 wins. I know that it's going to be hard to do, especially with the start that they're going to have. But if they can find a way to get 2 or 3 wins through the first part of their schedule, I definitely think they can go 4-2 in the second half. And, they have about as easy of an opening game when it comes to South Carolina this year that you could potentially see. I mean, it's not like they're playing, a potential number 2 or number 3 overall pick in the draft. So my point that I'm getting at is that I definitely do think that last year wasn't a mirage. I don't think this is a team that all of a sudden is going to become a true challenger for Georgia or even on the level of Tennessee consistently. I do think that South Carolina, in my opinion right now, has a very good chance to be the 3rd team in the East, and that team typically finished with 7 or 8 wins. So I think it may be a bit of a rough start, but when they learn their lessons through that rough start, I think they could once again pick up heat and have a very good end to the season.
yeah, the more I'm looking at the schedule and stuff and kind of building off what Shawn said, it's like that 6.5 is too close. It's kind of like previously where I'm like, I feel like if it was 7, I'd definitely do under, but there's 7. I think
these guys are going to get 7 wins, right? Like each of these teams, you're talking yourself into 7 wins. That's what I find myself doing. It's hard to pick the under right now.
I know that 6.5 is just such a I don't like it for the not so good teams of a conference, but no, I really think that there's going to be 7 wins here. So I'm actually going to change mine, but just barely over. They come across some tough games, but that opener, man, Max, that's going to be exciting to see. We'll see if May just goes all over them.
SEC over ACC all day long.
Oh my gosh, let's not do that, okay? We ain't coattail riding over here.
Go ahead, Bob. Yeah.
Okay. I hate to do it. I think I'm going to switch too. Just looking at that, Especially if I'm thinking about actually betting this,
Yeah.
that back end of Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, all at home, and then you have Clemson at home. That 4-game run is very good. You have Furman in there at the start. Um, and, so there you go. That's 5. I think they can get 2 more out of either home against Mississippi State, home against Florida, and going on the road to Missouri. Like, I, I I think that's doable. And then, of course, UNC, at I think it's a Duke's Mayo Classic or whatever in Charlotte. That's a winnable game as well. Um, yeah, I think that's a very gettable number at 6.5. With how Radler and crew have been. So yeah, no, I feel I'm going back on that. I think Shane Beamer and crew keep the vibes going in Columbia.
I'm gonna keep the under, but I mean, you guys. I mean, we've been joking about it, but I'm legitimately worried about that first game against South Carolina because, and this is why you all could be right in terms of the over for South Carolina because I feel like Shane Beamer and Spencer Rattler are giving off that vibe of we're gonna play like we have nothing to lose. The confidence and I mean if you've seen the quotes from South Carolina, like there seems just to be like uh, a unwavering confidence in Spencer Rattler's abilities to really have a career comeback and put the team on his back and kind of continue the season the way they started next year. And so I feel like they're going to be they have a chance to be like sort of that feisty team, moving forward, and they're going to have a lot of tests ahead of them. But I mean, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see. Like all this talk, all this stuff from last year, are they able to put it together for another year? I think that's the biggest question that keeps it from being like all right, can they get to those 7-8 wins? But I mean, the teams, if you look at the teams on their schedule, like just ignore home, road, neutral, like they're playing against a lot of tough teams, which is why I struggle taking them over. I mean, Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, like Kentucky, Clemson, North Carolina, obviously, like even Florida, even though you get that at home, like it's it's gonna be tough. But again, like if Beamer and Rattler just play like they have nothing to lose, then they're gonna be a problem for a lot of teams. So um, yeah, they should be
Yeah,
fun to watch this year.
absolutely. That UNC Carolina line, by the way, is sitting at 2.5 in favor of UNC. So I think I'd take South Carolina right now, straight up, if I were to make a bet today. But we'll see how we are
Yeah,
two weeks
that's
later.
gonna be hard too because I mean that audience is gonna be split right down the middle. Like Charlotte's like big. You get a lot of UNC graduates that move to Charlotte, but Columbia is only an hour and a half away, so that's going to be a great game. I can't wait for that. Um, all right, Texas A&M, big disappointment last year after a historic recruiting class. They won 5 games overall, 2-6 in the SEC, but their line this year is 7.5. Um, I had the over. Bobby's got the under. Lexi's got the over. Sean's got the under. We were split right down the middle. I'll go ahead and say this. A&M, I get why people doubt them. I understand, like, Jimbo Fisher and, just the way they played last year was just so weird. It was so crazy watching them play the way they played last year. And it was honest. I honestly felt bad for A&M fans. But um, this year, I feel like the home games are a little bit more favorable, and the road games aren't that bad. Going to Miami week 2, don't love it, but we don't know what Miami will be, and there's probably a chance that there's going to be more A&M fans in the stands at Miami than Miami fans, so you have to consider that. You go to Tennessee, that's a tough game, but at Ole Miss, At LSU is going to be a tough game, but I mean, on the road, I don't really like have that many issues besides Tennessee and LSU. A lot of their games are either going to be, the neutral site versus Arkansas. Their home schedule is, going to be some of these teams that we are talking about, hovering around, 6, 7, 8 win marks. So they're going to be playing either below or at their level for most of this home schedule, other than Alabama. And then, the road, really only go on the road 4 times this year. So, other than the neutral site games. So, um, I like A&M at a slightly over 7.5, probably 8 wins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the ultimate. Go,
Um.
go ahead, Lexi.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, I had the over too, and that my argument's kind of like the same as Max's. The schedule, like the home games, are really favorable. I think honestly, they might be 5-0 going into hosting Alabama in October. So we'll like see how that goes. But they probably go through a slump with Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, but then Ole Miss at home, Mississippi State, and Alabama Christian like before LSU. I think they end up winning 8 games, so it's just slightly over, but I think it's doable for them. It's not going to probably be as terrible as it was last year, although that was pretty hilarious to watch. But I didn't feel bad at all. um, but what do you think, Bobby or Shawn?
Shawn, I'll let you take this one because I'm pretty under on
Yeah,
A&M.
no, I think that I am too. I know, Lexi brings up a good point. Potential wise, Texas A&M, you could make a case for them potential wise to have one of the top 5 rosters in, the SEC. But you've got to have a lot of that hit, and you've got to have a lot of it hit early on. You've got that game against Miami in the second week of the season. You've got Auburn, who could be clicking from a very easy schedule, to start off their year. And then after that, you run into an Arkansas team. I don't think they're beating Arkansas at home. So I'm with you, Lexi. If a lot of people are hitting, yes, Texas A&M can start 5-0, but I could just as easily see them being 2-3 going to that stretch against Alabama and Tennessee. That's my big key about this is that, Connor Wegman is not one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. He's not someone that's going to pop. He's not someone, in my opinion, that's to the point, at least right now, to where he's going to win you games. So who's going to win you games? Texas A&M is hoping it's Bobby Petrino, but you got to have a lot of players be able to execute what he's looking to do. So for there to be just a lot of questions about who exactly those guys are to execute the game plan that the coaches put in place, for me to say I'm confident they'll get 8 wins so far this season, I think it's going to be hard to do. But I do agree with Lexi. It definitely starts out with how well they start the season. They get off to that 4-1, 5-0 start, we're having a different conversation. But if they struggle out of the gate, lose that second game to Miami, they need to get a big win at some point, even if it's Auburn. They need to get a big win to start off the season before they go into that Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee stretch.
I will say this, and I think this is a big part of why I do think they can be an over for Jimbo Fisher. And I didn't look up, the contract situation, whatever. But for Jimbo Fisher, Sean reminded me something that I thought of my mind earlier. You bring in Bobby Petrino. We know what he can do. I agree with you about how you need to have the players, and you need to have players that can do what you need them to do in order to win the games. I get all that, but I think the pressure, especially after last year, is immense in Aguilan. For Jimbo Fisher, like it's almost, I hate to use this like reasoning, but sometimes it just happens that way because people's backs are against the wall, and good coaches kind of figure it out. But like A&M's got to be better next year, and a jump from 5 to 8 wins would be a big improvement. But they got to be better next year because they have to be. Like a lot of people's jobs are on the line, especially when you think about the recruiting classes and everything else. Like there's no way that this team can be the same or worse than last year. They have to be like much better. So I think I'm curious to see how that pressure um, either makes diamonds or fall on your face. So I'm interested to see what happens, but that's a big part of this too. That's obvious though. That's everyone knows that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the history of Texas A&M is high pressure, high expectations, and always falling on your face. They do this over and over and over and over again. And they always convince themselves that they're figuring it out, that they can just throw money at the situation and it'll work. We're going to give Jimbo Fisher a fake national championship plaque before he even, coaches a ball game, and then it doesn't work out. And I see like 7 wins on this schedule. I think it's going to be pretty brutal. This is a team that could barely move the ball against what turned out to be a very bad Appalachian State team. Does Petrino fix that? I don't know. I don't think he does, because at the end of the day, I'm not behind Wagman at all. I don't think they have a solid quarterback. I don't think they have the right stuff on offense, and they kind of haven't for a while. They decided Jimbo Fisher, who is a washed-up offensive mastermind, decided to bring up another washed-up offensive guy who, Petrino was at Missouri State prior to this. So for me, Petrino has that reputation, but my thing is, he doesn't have they don't have the horsepower to run, and not only that, but they have a pretty brutal schedule. All of those, other than Miami, all of those road games are brutal. At Tennessee, at Ole Miss, at LSU. That is tough. And then your home games, getting Alabama at home, obvious. And that's the thing that's wild. They'll probably win 7 games and then beat out, but like somehow one of them will be Alabama, and then, lose to Auburn and have a stressful game against UL Monroe. That just feels like how this A&M thing is going to keep going and going, but they'll just keep stacking up good D linemen because it's Texas A&M. So we'll see how it
By
goes.
the way, sorry if anyone's watching from the state of Mississippi. We're not going to talk about Ole Miss or Mississippi State today. If you watched this far, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of teams in the SEC. But no, we sure.
I will say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will say this. If there was a year for Lane Kiffin with Jackson Dart and Quashon Judkins to make the best of this opportunity, if there was a year to do it, it's now. But that's what's really going to define the SEC West. And that's where I think Alabama is a bit behind the 8 ball. There's some really, really good quarterback, running back options there. I would go this far as to say, that may not go this far, but talent-wise at least, you could see Auburn kind of be on the same level as Alabama when it comes to their quarterback and running back play. That right now is where it is when it comes to Alabama's quarterback situation. They should still have a pretty good running back situation, but I'll stop short of making that a proclamation. But my point is that Arkansas, Ole Miss as well, the quarterback running back combinations for both those schools, if they hit in both those areas, those could be 2 surprise teams in the West this year.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I mean, we should talk. I mean, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Will Rogers, Mississippi State, like all great. Got really interesting and great. Like, potentially could have good years. And I think the SEC just as always has a lot that a lot of talent in the conference, and so no shade at all, but definitely want to shout those teams out too. Okay, Tennessee. We're gonna move on to Tennessee, and Tennessee obviously had a great year last year with Hendon Hooker, went 11-2, 6-2 in the SEC. Unfortunate. I mean, like hate the way their season ended. Hate the injury to Hendon. Hate the fact that Tennessee, wasn't able to really continue what they started at the end of the year. But thankfully, you can build upon that the next year with the same coach. You got a potential. Some people are saying Heisman hopeful. Some people are saying, NFL draft sleeper Joe Milton, who Lexi on our panel is very familiar with from his days at Michigan. But I mean, Tennessee can still make some noise this year. The Vegas has their line at 9.5. Um, we're split down the middle with Bobby and Sean having the under. Lexi and I have the over on that. Sean, Tennessee's your team. Tell us why you have the under.
Yeah, and it just dawned on me, Lexi being the avid Michigan Detroit, Michigan Wolverine Detroit Lions fan,
I was going to mention it too.
isn't it amazing that Joe Milton comes from Michigan and now is our hopeful quarterback for the Tennessee Volunteers, and Hendon Hooker, who just so happens to be Joe Milton's best friend now in the NFL, what team is he on? He just so happens to be Jared Goff's backup now with the Lions. So
Yes. I was
works out
so
pretty well.
happy. So
That was a
happy
great
about
pick.
that pick.
It was a great pick.
He's
No,
going to be great.
I think Jared Goff it can be legitimate for the Lions, especially for the weapons that they have. I'm a Jared Goff fan, but of course I'd love for Hendon Hooker to work
Absolutely.
out. When it comes to Tennessee, it's can you sustain the success that you had last year? I don't think that we're as good of a team as we were last year. We lost a lot of talent. With the wide receivers that we lost, with obviously Hendon Hooker being as good as he was. I know that Joe Milton is going to create highlight tape after highlight tape because of how good of an arm he has. But the decision making, I think, definitely has improved in his time at Tennessee. But is he going to make all of the necessary throws that he needs to under pressure, or throwing the finesse throws underneath, or making the right decisions of knowing, you're not going to be able to out throw the defense every single time? I think that he will show the ability to do that at times. But do I think that this Tennessee team can be once again in the mix for a potential college football playoff? I don't think they can. I think that there may be a chance where you potentially could see them be 6-0 by the time they play Alabama, but you also could potentially see them being 4-2. I think Joe Milton has a huge game in a game that he shouldn't, to help us win a game that's either a toss-up or that we shouldn't win. But I also think that mistakes are made by him in at least one game where we lose a game that we shouldn't lose. So I think that it's an 8, 9, 10 win team, or excuse me, an 8 or 9 win team. I think the defense overall should be a bit more consistent, but our offense just it lost a lot of talent. And so while a lot of these names have been in Tennessee's system for multiple years, Josh Heupel, I think, is a legitimate, ceiling raiser as a head coach. I pick 8 or 9 wins. I think we establish ourselves going forward as an 8 or 9 win team. And, every so often, we're getting in that college football picture. But 8 or 9 wins is where I have us at.
Yeah, I mean, you can't forget that you lost Jalen Hyatt, excuse me, as well in the draft, and again, a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, which often happens. Good teams attract more attention, in the NFL. So the what separates the Alabamas of the world, from teams who get hot every few years is the ability to sustain it. So this is the year where we're going to see, all right, has Tennessee developed the talent that they brought in? They're higher in the recruiting rankings this year, so I mean, we'll see what they can do. Bobby, you have Tennessee under as well. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's when you have a dream season like that, and then you have that loss of so many offensive guys, replace it with a guy like Joe Milton, who is a little bit inconsistent, will make mistakes, and then you have I don't think they'll be good enough to hit that mark. It's a different level to go back and reload. And I think this program's set up for success. This Tennessee team isn't going anywhere. I genuinely believe that. But year 2, you get Georgia at home. That's a plus, but it's still Georgia. You can play them anywhere, and that's an issue. I like their road games. I think all of them. I think a couple of them are okay. I think a couple of them are tough. I think obviously always difficult winning at the Swamp. Always difficult in a rivalry environment at Alabama, who will be hungry for revenge after last time out. And I just, in addition to those 2 games, I think they lose to Georgia. I think they lose to Alabama. In addition to those 2, I think they trip up somewhere else. Milton's just too inconsistent. I think they probably lose at the Swamp, even, I would say. So
But I
we'll see
will.
how it goes.
I
I
will.
think overall
Go ahead.
it's a positive schedule. The line's just too high.
I will say I agree with Bobby 110%. Bobby's just going to compliment Heupel because he wants him at Oklahoma. It ain't going to happen. But anywho, the point that I'm getting at is that
No, no,
I
no,
will
no,
say
no.
when it comes to Milton, the inconsistency I agree is there. But that Clemson game last year, he definitely showed that he can step up in a big moment. So that really surprised me. So I agree with you. But when I talk about inconsistency, I think that he may make too many mistakes in the game and lose one for us, but I also think that he could be a huge reason why we win a big game as well. I think he showed he could play big on a big stage. So completely in agreement with you, Bobby.
We know it's been. Okay.
Right, but I do want to say, kind of reminds me of another Josh Heupel coached quarterback, Trevor Knight, goes in, beats Alabama in a bowl game, next year stinks it up. So
On
yeah.
this line of Milton, Lexi, it's a couple of years ago when he played for Michigan. I know, things change, but just from your kind of like observation, do you feel like, because we know he has the talent, all the talent in the world, we're gonna hear that all year, but do you feel like his issue at Michigan was more like what do you feel was his biggest sort of like bugaboo there?
I just think that there was a lot of QBs in the room, and that I don't think that maybe Harbaugh saw what a lot of us do. And that's not even like a knock to Harbaugh. I just don't think he worked in the system in which our offense was ran. And I've said this from the get go. If that kid gets accurate, he's going to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. The kid has incredible strength. I watched him chuck the football 75 yards out of the big house into the parking lot. That's never been an issue. Um, I think that he has not had the quarterback development right away that he should have had all along. And I am, I'll be your hype man for this, Shawn. I think he's going to go off this year. I think that it's going to be a 10-win team. I think that, yeah, it's like a drop off from what you guys had in offense, but like even Bobby said, this program is kind of here to stay. They're not going away again. So, what the coach has, that the guys kind of believing in the program too. You can see it with how you guys played last year. So, I think Georgia and Alabama are going to be the only loss. You're going to be right there in a lot of other games too, but I don't know. I think the best of Joe Milton. I really, really hope that it kind of comes to fruition and because the sky's the ceiling for the kid. I mean, and I think the world knows that. He's just got to get his head on fully straight for it.
Yeah,
One
obviously
thing I was praying for.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I will say
Yeah.
this, and I'll be done. No, but one thing I was praying for, the absolute one thing that I was praying for after going through the Derek Dooleys and the Butch Joneses and all these other guys, the Jeremy Pruitts, I just wanted exciting football. And I can tell you this: I think a reason why Joe Milton probably didn't work out of Michigan, Jim Harbaugh seems to prefer. Jim Harbaugh seems to prefer his quarterbacks to have the floor of a game manager, but occasionally be able to step up and be a reason that they win the game. That's not Joe Milton. Joe Milton's not a game manager. He is a big play guy that you hope consistently makes the big plays without costing you with bad decisions. And so in Josh Heupel's offense, even with our receivers kind of taking a bit of a step back overall, the excitement's going to be there. A big key for us, who's going to step up to be our receivers? Can Jalen Wright have a big year as a running back? And can our defense have any type of consistency? But it's going to be another exciting year in brand of football, and that's what I'm looking forward to just as much as us being able to win 10 or 11 games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to point out that I feel like Tennessee, out of all the teams we've talked about so far, you guys have like a well balanced schedule. I mean, you got a couple of good non conference games to start out. I think Virginia's going to be bad this year, so you take care of them. Austin P, tough game at the Swamp, but who Florida's rebuilding. You don't really know who's the quarterback on the other side. That could be one of those games where Joe Milton just sort of like takes over and out talents the other team, and then you follow that up with UTSA, South Carolina A&M, and then your first test, I would say, is probably going to be, or not probably, definitely going to be at Tuscaloosa, and then like we'll see where Kentucky is, and then you've got UConn coming to town, and then Missouri before you see Georgia, and then Vanderbilt to end out the year. So I mean, I feel like it's not one of those schedules where all the easy games are at the top and all the hard games are at the bottom, or all the tough games at the top and all the easy games at the bottom. Like you guys have a good balance of test, mixed in with some of the easiest opponents, and sometimes that can be a schedule like that can be the thing that helps a team more than anything else. So that's one thing I'll leave you guys with for Tennessee. We got a couple more teams to talk about, so let's keep pushing to LSU, who also has a 9.5 over under win total line. They were 10-4 last year, 6-2 with the SEC. Surprised folks, I think, with how good they were so quickly. Even though we know, Brian Kelly, is a good coach. Took Notre Dame to multiple CFPs, yada yada yada. Everyone unanimous on the over. So we don't all have to discuss why, but does anybody want to shout out why they are high on LSU this year?
I mean, look at their schedule too, and just kind of what they were last year, and then also what Brian Kelly's continuous to do. I mean, I see him losing at Bama, and that's it. I mean, I think it's going to be come down to the very end for them. I definitely see 11 wins. Maybe they drop a random one, like falling short, but I see 11 here.
I'll say that the Florida State game is interesting because a lot of people have Florida State as a potential ACC winner and also a potential CFP like contender. I don't know where I'm at on Florida State like ceiling wise, but like that game is gonna say a lot about like both teams. So
Well, that game being in a neutral location too
yeah,
is huge because I feel like if it was at either, that place is going to be like, crazy good for a home game, but not lacking.
Yeah, it'll be in Orlando, but like, let's be honest, LSU fans travel, so that'll be solid.
and and I think that Brian Kelly, has been here before. Notre Dame always started off the season, with a pretty big matchup, because of the fact that they had to beef up their schedule to be in the national championship picture. So this is nothing new for him. I do think Florida State's going to be one of the tougher matchup for them. Travis, I believe, the last name's Travis, right? Max, their quarterback. I'm a huge believer in Mike Norvell coming from Memphis, but I don't think he gets the job done. I think Jaden Daniels is someone that's going to be motivated. He didn't necessarily stand out by just being like a Heisman level type candidate at the end of last year, but he just made good decisions. He played good football, and I think that that's what stands out about this. He did very well to help LSU continue their ascension last year. I agree with Lexi. I do think that they're going to win at least 10 games. I think that they can beat Bama this year. I think that they're a team that's probably going to lose. I look at them kind of like as Tennessee last year. I don't think they're going to blow people out like Tennessee, but Brian Kelly is not the type of coach that coaches a team to absolutely destroy people. He's someone that coaches teams and figures out how to win, at some point in time. So I think that's what's going to stand out about them. I think that they're going to win at least 10 games, and I'll go as far to say this, we'll get to this at the end of the show. I am very, very high on LSU this year.
yeah, and yeah. Jordan Travis from Florida State has given me nightmares as a UNC fan. I like that's gonna be a hard game to start. That's gonna be a great quarterback game though. Like Jordan Travis and Jaden Daniels week 1 is gonna be like can't miss TV.
Yeah, last year's matchup was awesome. I
100%.
gotta add that was banger 100%. Of a game.
Definitely unfair they get to play Grambling and Army, but
don't sleep on Army. Do not sleep on that mid-season Army game.
Oh, yeah.
No. Right, but hey, do you think they really want to learn how to stop the option a week before Bama? Yeah, I'm telling you. You think Army's easy, and then all of a sudden you're about to get upset. And everybody's
Michigan
having to watch
almost
the game
lost
on
to
a
Army
stream.
a few years back. It gave me a heart attack.
Kyler's team almost they took us overtime.
Did you guys play in the same year? I feel like wasn't that like 18, 19.
It might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
18,
2018
yeah.
for us because those service academy teams, throw them in the middle. It always trips you up,
Mhm.
and our defense was garbage at the start, but yeah, our Army, man, they brutal pull.
All right. Next team is Alabama. Their line is 10.5. Last year they were 11-2, 6-2 in the SEC. Back to the top in the SEC in recruiting. Bobby was the only over for Alabama. Why do you like Alabama this year?
Well, I think just I I cap Alabama at 2 losses pretty much every year, frankly, in terms of the regular season. It's just so hard to beat them once. That once they do get beat, they kind of activate. They did, and not only that, but both of their games they lost last year, or the games they lost last year, were just so incredibly narrow. They do have issues. I think they do play a lot of close games, and that Texas game is going to be tough. As we know, UT pushed them to the brink in Austin last year. But to me, I feel like they get 11 wins. I think they get tripped up. I don't think they're going to be a national title contender potentially. I kind of think they get nipped twice. I think they probably. I'm telling you, I'm not big on, like, not that big on Auburn, but I kind of have a weird feeling about Hugh Freeze at Jordan Hare. That just feels like he's like some shenanigans are going to go down there. But ultimately, I think Alabama is capable of winning 11 games any single year. If you have Nick Saban, I think they are. I think their revamped coaching staff works, and ultimately, you got to be a really bad Alabama team to lose more than twice. I just don't see them doing it.
Lexi, did you change your pick, or were you saying it with the under?
No, yeah, I was like, oh, what is the line? Yeah, 10.5. I I think they're gonna end up dropping 2 games. But like I said, they're kind of like right there with LSU, and that game really, could be a toss up. Who knows what's gonna happen with it? But outside of that, their schedule's pretty easy for being. That Texas game too. That's like what I was like thinking about. That 10 wins. I think 10 wins are really the ceiling for them. I mean, this is a Nick Saban team, but I just don't see it for sure being 11. So I'm gonna just keep right under it.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, like, my under take is based on being unsure about their situation at quarterback, which, in the past, like, Nick Saban was sort of able to put whatever out there and still win, but I think things have changed. So I think you have to be concerned about it. And then two, like, they've had issues over the last couple of years, with being on the road, playing on the road, and the road schedule this year isn't that scary, but it is like, I think it does have a team in there that could catch them slipping, whether it's Mississippi State or A&M or Kentucky. Like, I think they could get gotten one of those, and then maybe, you look at LSU, you look at Tennessee or Texas, and they might lose 2 or 3 there. So, yeah, I'm not really like excited to give them the under, but I think there are just a lot of questions about Alabama that I'm not really loving, in order to give them the over, especially with the SEC being a little bit better this year.
Yeah, and I do think, the one thing that stands out about Alabama, for me, for them to truly be a national title contender this year, is that they do have arguably the best defensive combination when you look at secondary versus line. The Dallas Turner as their pass rush, and Kool-Aid McChristy as their cornerback. That arguably is the best defensive duo in the nation. They could easily have the best defense in the SEC. And if that's the case, sure, they probably could be a national title contender. I just don't trust their quarterback situation. When I've seen Jalen Milroe play, there's not anything that really stands out to me. I don't see his arm really being something that stands out as being trustworthy. I think that he could do some damage with his legs, but I don't think that he's someone that truly is going to be there with his arm. Ty Simpson would love for him to succeed. He's from my, we went to the same high school. I think that he's a very talented quarterback who probably has not developed where people had wanted him to. And then the transfer for Notre Dame with Tommy Rees as the offensive coordinator, they just that's your game manager. I don't trust the quarterback position, and I don't think that there is just a clear stud in terms of an offensive difference maker like a Brock Bowers for Georgia. I don't necessarily know if that's there for Alabama as well. So they're going to have a defense that's head and shoulders above everybody else, I think, because I think that, again, with that Jackson Dart and Quashawn Juggins combo in Mississippi with the KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders combination at Arkansas, I could see one of those two teams definitely giving them a fit, in those matchups. So I think they're a 9-10 win team.
That's a great point, Sean. Like, it's not just the quarterback, but it's like they don't have like a transformational tight end, receiver, running back. Like, it's like, who's the guy that's gonna be there, Mark Ingram, Najee Harris, Julio Jones. Like, who is that for them this year? That's outside of the quarterback position. And yeah, Derrick Henry. Yeah. Insert Heisman winning running back. But
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Last year was by far the worst running back talent that they've had in the Nick Saban era. I don't even remember where he went to go play in the NFL, but yeah. I wouldn't have used a first-round pick on him. She's not even listening. She ain't listening.
I'm sorry, I was reading. What'd you say?
We were talking crap about Alabama's running backs. When they win the draft.
Yeah, I was bad-mouthing Jahmyr Gibbs. Yeah.
He's gonna be great, so you better be ready to watch him fight on that line. I'm so excited about that pick. I was the only person not pissed at Ford Field that day too, which is pretty funny. It got silent, and I was like, I don't hate this that bad. Then everyone saw what he could do, and it's kind of just been he's won people over already.
All right.
If Gibbs and Hooker want to win a Super Bowl, I'll be happy. Go ahead.
Hey, let's manifest it. It's happening.
After Levis and Henry win it. There you go. So yeah.
All right, we got one more team to talk about in the SEC before we get to some of these superlatives, and that's Georgia, whose line is at 11.5. Last year they were 15-0 overall, 8-0 in the SEC. I mixed that up on the doc. And yeah, Georgia is still Georgia. Again, we talked about the change of quarterback, but folks still expect them to be pretty good. Shawn and Lexi have them under. Bobby and I have them over. Lexi, what's up? Why don't you feel like Georgia's going to win more than 11.5 games this year?
To just say that a team will go undefeated, I just have a really hard time doing so. I think even if they went I don't know. I'm so torn. I feel like there's going to be one game that they give up to I'm not sure who, but it's probably going to be at least one. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see come end of season between Alabama, LSU, and Georgia, and if they all have kind of one loss, how that's going to look. But I really think they're kind of all right there, but I just can't say it's going to be a 12-0 season again. Just can't do it.
This schedule is absolute tissue paper. And I think it just lines up. And I know there's some fatigue out there. Georgia's been great the past 2 years. Nobody wants to see a three-peat. That's a little boring. But I just can't not talk myself into this team running the complete slate. And I think they will. Of course, this is college football. Things can happen. I just think that Kirby Smart is a different animal. We've all heard his pregame speech before TCU. We've seen how he's, gaslit his entire football program into thinking everybody thinking they suck. I just see this train continuing to run. I have Georgia sweeping the SEC regular season.
Which game do you think they lose, Lexi?
I really think that at Tennessee is going to be a little bit sketchy for them. I mean, it was a good game last year, you know. So I I really I can't say like, oh, I mean, don't get me wrong, this schedule is very easy, but I can't just wholesomely say 12. I just can't. There's going to be one in there that just slips up, and then it's going to be chaos come the end of the season. So I'll be happy to watch that.
Sean,
Yeah,
I think you're the
it's a
under as
very
well.
yeah. I have the under. I just I don't know. Again, there's I keep going to this for the same thing, and it's because I'm old as hell now that I don't keep up with the talents that are around the SEC. Listen, it's not that a lot of these teams don't have potential, have good talent. It's just that it's not established talent, right? You know, you've got Brock Bowers in the Georgia offense. As a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and put the disclaimer out there. I think Bowers is the SEC MVP this year because I just think he's that good of a talent at tight end. They also have a pretty good running back combination. You may be able to say they're the 1 and 2 best running back combination, in the league. But Carson Beck as a quarterback, I think there's talent there, but how will he be able to adjust? Will they be able to once again? Because I don't think I think the defense will be elite. I don't think it'll be historic like it has been at least 2 years ago. But will he be able to win them games when they need to? Because every year they seem to play a very close game. And so I think at some point in time they're going to slip up. I do, the one difference between them playing Tennessee this year, they're playing at Tennessee, but it's the second to last game of the year for both teams. That could play to Tennessee's favor. It could play to Georgia's favor. So how do they play from behind? What happens if the defense struggles early? What happens if it's early turnovers against a team? This Georgia team has always been able to answer and figure it out. But the one thing, I mentioned Stetson Bennett's natural talent may not have been there last year. He was cool, calm, and collected no matter what, and that played such a huge role for them in their 2 national title runs.
Absolutely.
Do you have Carson Beck being at that same level? So I just find it hard to see any team running the gauntlet in the SEC this year, no matter how easy the schedule is. So when I say under, I think they'll go 11-1. I think they're a college football playoff team. But yeah, I don't feel as strongly about this Georgia team as I have, the last two. Because, even when you're talking about, the defense last year not being as good as it was 2 years ago, you still had Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith taken 9 and 10 in last year's draft. I believe that Philadelphia took Nolan Smith, or at least he was a first-round pick. He may have been 30th, actually. But you had 2 first-round picks that helped out the defensive line. You may get that again in time, but I'm just not as sold on this team this year as I have been over the past few years for Georgia.
Yeah, I actually might have to change my answer because you'll see in the later on questions I have Georgia missing the SEC championship, but I mean yeah I think like I said earlier, Georgia's going to be battling all year against themselves, the talent, the mentality. You know, I think both things can happen. They win all the regular season this year, or they slip up once. I don't see them slipping up more than once, but I think I think both things could possibly both scenarios could definitely occur. All right, let's get down to some of these more and more fun questions about the SEC as a whole. The SEC MVP, everyone except for me, Brock Bowers at Georgia. I think Brock Bowers is like definitely you know like the most talented offensive player in the conference for sure. I like Jaden more just because obviously the position quarterback. Um, somebody mentioned it earlier. I believe it was Shawn. He's just got a really talent for being able to make good decisions in that offense. Obviously, has a lot of physical talent as well. I just feel like he's next in line in terms of being the quarterback face of the SEC. And I can see him having a good year. But I obviously, for obvious reasons, Brock Bowers is a great pick to be the most valuable player in the SEC, especially if he has one of those seasons where it's obvious that he's carrying that Georgia offense. Like it's obvious that they're just saying, "Hey, I'm gonna throw it up here. Brock Bowers go get it." Like if it's that type of offense, then yeah, Brock Bowers is MVP. But um, I'm throwing Jaden's name in the hat. Any other Brock Bowers takes? What people want to throw out there before we move on?
Yeah, I know that we've, talked about, there being, historic tight ends before, Kellen Winslow, things such as that. I throw Kellen Winslow out there because I said Vernon Davis, others that have been there. But Brock Bowers is just, he is just so, Isaac Nada was the guy that was there before Bowers. But Bowers is just so darn consistent. He has that Gronk healthy ability to be able to get open, George Kittle ability to be able to just get open no matter what. He can make the big play down the field. He can turn. He can run after the catch. He is just about as a complete of a tight end prospect as we have seen in quite a while. I won't go as far as to say he's the best one we've ever seen, but he's pretty on up there in terms of his talent. And, he's someone that can contribute in multiple ways. He can be that he was, many times the top option last year. He's won 2 straight national titles, and his blocking can also help out, especially downfield, help out the running game. So it's just a very smart, just absolutely phenomenal player. That's why I definitely think that he is the SEC MVP until he makes a crucial drop against Tennessee.
Ooh, all right. Uh, okay, speaking of Tennessee, SEC Coach of the Year. We all had different answers except for me and Lexi.
I changed.
Oh, you?
Yeah, I did. I did. I talked myself into it when I was getting hype about like Milton and stuff. So I think it's gonna be Hubel.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I think Josh Heupel is a great pick for Coach of the Year.
Heupel, yeah.
I think it's a great pick for Coach of the Year because I think if with again all the losses we talked about, if Tennessee is able to continue to be as good as or better than they were last year, I think that's obviously something that you have to give credit to the coach too. So that's why he's my pick. Um, Bobby, you have Kirby. I think it's sort of yeah.
I think having the dedication and coaching skills to keep focus for a 3rd straight year, that takes some damn good coaching. So that's why I'm going to give it to Kirby.
Yeah, I went Brian Kelly, and the reason, and Max, forgive me if I interrupted you. Yeah,
No.
I went Brian Kelly because I think at the end of the day, I think that LSU goes 10-2, possibly. I think Georgia goes 11-1, but I do think that LSU is going to be the team that you're going to see probably have the highest ceiling, in terms of their play this year at times. They may not play it as consistently high of a level as Georgia all the time, but I do think that they have the potential to play at an even higher level than Georgia this year. Again, because of their quarterback play, because of Malik Neighbors. And I think Brian Kelly is clearly a top 4 coach in the SEC. So I think this year Kelly gets it, and that's my pick. Don't necessarily think that LSU goes undefeated, but I think that Kelly wins Coach of the Year this year.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly. I mean, all the answers definitely, could happen or valid, for sure. Um, SEC championship participants. I think everyone has Bobby, Lexi. You guys have Georgia, Bama, valid. I've got Tennessee and LSU. Sean's got LSU and Georgia. Again, this is sort of messes up my over under picks from earlier, but I said Tennessee and LSU because I can see a scenario where Georgia drops that game against Tennessee, loses their bid to the SEC championship, and then just sort of is that de facto CFP pick? Like they find a way to the committee puts them there, but not necessarily SEC champions. I feel like if they lose to Tennessee, they could be in jeopardy, especially if Tennessee's able to be pretty much undefeated or one loss, to that point. And then LSU I have coming out of the West because I think everything we talked about with Alabama, some of the other teams, I think LSU is just that team that sort of has it together in the West and quarterback talent, favorable schedule. I like LSU to be there, whether it's Georgia or Tennessee. But I think I can see a scenario where Tennessee makes it to the SEC championship. anybody can comment on their matchup.
I think there's a very good chance Tennessee beats Georgia, but especially with it being at Tennessee and late in the season, I just don't think that Tennessee will have as good of a record. I think Georgia very likely is undefeated by the time that they get to Tennessee. So I think that Tennessee has a good shot of beating Georgia. But let's put it this way: I think that it's much more likely Tennessee beats Georgia than it is Tennessee has a better record or equal record to Georgia entering that game.
Hmm.
I think that's very well said.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia and Bama. Like I said, Bama LSU are going to be neck and neck, so that could definitely change. But even with Georgia losing a game and stuff, they're still going to be the championships in the championship game. So
Yeah, I've got Alabama and Georgia as well. I think Alabama having LSU at home is just such an advantage flipper. I think, and overall, I think just the inverse of last season's schedule, everything sets up for them really well. I'm not afraid of them going on the road at Kyle Field. Little bit worried about the Iron Bowl, as you always should be if you're an Alabama fan, going on the road to Jordan Hare. But overall, I feel like Alabama gets it done and gets back to the SEC championship. And Georgia, like I said earlier, runs the slate.
So we've got SEC winner picks. Um, myself and Shawn have LSU. Bobby and Lexi have Georgia. No need to really hash out yet. We all kind of have talked about I would like these teams, but definitely will be interesting to see what that looks like. And then the fun question: how many SEC teams make the college football playoff? I think that this is as good of a year as any to bet on two teams. Bobby has one team making it to the CFP out of the SEC. Why don't you give us some insight on why?
That might be a little bold on my end, I will say. But I just have a weird feeling because here's the thing. I think if there are two SEC teams, one of them has two losses. I just have a feeling that, the other teams in the SEC are going to cannibalize each other, and other than Georgia, and then Georgia beats them. And I don't know. I have a feeling that the SEC champion, is going to beat a 2-loss Alabama, something like that, 2-loss LSU, and that fully knocks him out. And then we'll have a whole great conversation about, oh, well, should the 3-loss SEC team get in over the 1-loss Big 12 champion or 1-loss USC? It's going to be great. We're going to love that. But I just have a feeling that it feels like a kind of a cannibal year, I suppose.
Yeah, my thought in getting two SEC teams into the championship is a 2-loss LSU team beating a 1-loss Georgia team, and at that point you've got it. I'll be honest, I haven't looked too much at the Big Ten, but last year, do you have a setup where both Ohio State and Michigan were clear college football playoff candidates when they went into that game? And Lexi, Michigan, to the surprise of myself, I'll be honest with you, they kicked ass. They did very well. You also have the Pac-12 element. You have USC, who I think is definitely kind of like we've always saw with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. I think USC is about as good of a lot for the college football playoff as any team right now in the nation. So I and that's basically to the point of Caleb Williams playing so well. But I think that there is a very good chance that if the rest of college football doesn't exceed expectations, you could see two SEC teams. But if you get a team that emerges from the Big 12, you get a surprise team from the Big 12, you get your usual Big 10, ACC, Pac-12 candidate in there, you're looking at 6 or 7 teams that have a legit shot. Then, if the SEC to, Bobby's point, cannibalizes itself, then what happens? If you have Georgia run the slate, I'll put it to you this way. I think that the worst thing for the SEC to have happen if they want two teams in the college football playoff is for Georgia to run the slate and for them to be undefeated to win the SEC title. Because at that point, you really haven't had anybody else show that they're worthy of being in the CFP.
Yeah, I mean, It's gonna be hard. I think this is a year where like I put down two teams, but I'm not feeling confident about it because this is a year where there's so much talent at the top across the Power Five, right? So it's like you've got a top team, you've got a CFP contender in the Pac-12 with USC plus some other good teams there. You've got two CFP contenders, possibly three in the Big Ten with Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. Two or three in the SEC, maybe two in the ACC, maybe one or two in the Big 12. So it's going to be hard. Like, you're going to have so many. I think you're going to have a lot of teams with good arguments. So I'm reluctantly putting two. I guess I'm just so used to SEC bias that, like, I won't be surprised. But this is a year where, like, we can see some parity in the conferences for the playoff because the teams at the top of some of these conferences are also uh, big contenders to make the CFP.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the last year that they have to do four teams. They will absolutely find a way to put two SEC teams in, regardless of what happens. But yeah, I mean, you do have those outside things like USC, and I mean, USC, I have predicting in, and then and then Michigan and Ohio State doesn't sneak in like they did last year because somebody else kind of shit the bed. So I think it's going to be two SEC teams and then like a Big Ten and then the USC if they, as long as they don't, you know, fall short there when they need to.
Yep, Ohio
Yeah,
State gets Travion Henderson going with them. Is it Amegba? Is that his? I forget the other wide receiver's name with Marvin Harrison the second. But Ohio State easily could
He's in the
have the
NFL
best.
now.
Who?
Jackson Smith. Is that who you're thinking
No,
of?
no, 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 no. Marvin Harrison the second, and then I can't think of the other one's name. I think it's Emogba. I can't think of his name, but
Oh
my
yeah,
point
yeah. I
was
can't. I know.
Emeka
Ed
Egbuka, right?
exactly. Yes, yes, yes. And
Yeah.
again, I'm horrible
Tried
with
to
I was
names.
like,
My
are you
apologies. Yeah. The thing that I'm getting at though is that they potentially could have three first round talents, in the um, SEC or excuse me, in the first round of the NFL draft. But we've seen this story before, right? Last year we saw it with Stroud and their wide receivers, but Harbaugh, Michigan, better defense, better coach team. That's just the truth. Ryan Day, we'll see. For me, one of the biggest storylines this year is Ryan Day. Do you have a job a year from now? That's my question. Because I could easily just as much see Ryan Day being the offensive coordinator for the Titans if he struggles again with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm being serious because at this point, you've got plenty of coaches out there who would love to come to Ohio State. Ryan Day, it just seems like consistently 3 years running has the best skill set, offensive skill set players in the nation, and he's not really done anything with it. So we'll see. But my point is that I could easily see if you have some of these big matchups later on in the year, like Georgia, Tennessee, potentially both having one loss or being undefeated, Michigan, Ohio State, potentially both being undefeated. You see those type of things happen. I think that it could be a hard setup for the SEC to have two teams in the college football playoff.
I'll say real quick, the biggest indictment on Ryan Day, like, could be the fact that one, it could be how CJ Stroud plays in the NFL because we know like the way that he played against Georgia versus the way he played the rest of the season was like night and day. And then if he continues to like be a different guy in the NFL than he was in college, and Ryan Day continues to struggle with all this talent that he has up at Ohio State, like that could be a big issue for him in terms of job security. I agree. That's a great point, Shawn. But
Yeah. They pretend like it's not going to like put him on an extreme hot seat if he loses in Ann Arbor, but I really think they would leave him there if that ever happened. I
mhm.
really do because they think that it's not a standard, but no, it's absolutely a standard. You beat Michigan and all else will fall into place. So he's going to have the hottest seat of the year.
For sure. Um, well,
Let Josh
folks,
Heupel ride a hot offense to actually make the playoff this year, and watch Ohio State fail and tell me there's not going to be options that are out there. I don't want there to be options out there, but my point is that there's some good coaches that are out there that can come in and can show that they can make the most of talent. We'll see what happens. But, if they lose again in Ann Arbor, and this time again, to your point, it's in Ann Arbor. If they lose again, at some point, Ryan Day's not holding the standard. And I never root for somebody to fail. I root for him to succeed at the NFL level as the Titans head or offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's going to be a big job for like a lot of people. I can't think of the names right now. That's going to be fascinating to see. But yeah, all to be seen in the world of college football. But for now, it's been a great show, Shawn. Thank you again for gracing our podcast space. Always a pleasure to have you. You will be back. Don't worry.
It's always mine. Thank you for the invite.
Of course, and you will be back. Don't worry, folks who are fans of Shawn. We'll see Shawn back here on the Weekenders. But until then, Shawn, let the audience know where they can find you, where they can follow you, watch you, etc., etc.
Yeah, so I am. You can find me at StatsSAC on Twitter. I'm a huge Tennessee fan, born and raised here in Tennessee, so I cheer for all of them. But as you can see over my right shoulder, I am a huge comic book fan. Batman's the best superhero of all time. If you have a different opinion of that, keep it to yourself or debate your refrigerator. I don't care. So I actually am at StatsSAC on Twitter. I Bluff City Media here in Memphis, Tennessee, covers the Memphis sports scene. I podcast and write for them when it comes to the Grizzlies. Also cover the Braves when it comes to batterypower.com. So do some podcasting, some writing on baseball as well as basketball, but always wanting to talk football, the Titans, the Vols, just SEC in general, all things anti-Oklahoma, what have you. We're here to sit here and love everybody else, but hate Bobby in Oklahoma. That's what stands for. So,
when was this a rivalry?
It's a rivalry. It absolutely is a rivalry because it's picking back up next year, my friend. So, I don't necessarily know if we'll see you in Norman, but, we'll be seeing you at some point. Okay, Bobby? All right. By the way, change your hat.
Okay. I'm definitely going up to Knoxville for sure. I'll be there.
As a matter of fact, just stop. Okay? All right, I'm done.
All right, folks, you're not going to get a better NBA Memphis Grizzlies follow if you follow Shawn. Everybody else, great to see you.